Hello everyone, welcome to another S5 history class. We're still talking about the Industrial Revolution, but in this recording we're going to focus on transportation. So the questions that we will answer are: how did uh, machines for transportation improve? And how did communication links, meaning roads for instance, you know, what progress did we see with regard to these things? Okay, so this is a picture of the a train locomotive, and perhaps this is quite telling. This picture, it encapsulates maybe the progress made in the Industrial Revolution with regard to transport or transportation. Okay, so remember that the agricultural revolution, what it brought about was this um, immense increase in the production of goods, and also an increase in the movement of people, primarily from the rural areas to the cities. So you have plenty of goods and people moving about. So the old system, the old roadways, for instance, they became inadequate. They were not sufficient. They could not meet just meet the challenge of having to transport so many people and so many goods. So, you know, new means, new ways, and new machines had to be invented. So, for instance, roads were improved. We don't really think about roads, but we take concrete or asphalt roads for granted. But in the 18th and the early 19th centuries, words were really bad. So until about 1750, if you talk about roads, you're talking about dirt tracks. So they're not paved, okay? So we're not talking about smooth, level roads. We're talking about roads that were full of potholes, uh, you know, um, like those craters. Um, And of course, because they were not paved, they were just made of soil, like dirt, they became muddy in winter. So people used to travel in carts in horse-drawn coaches like this. But because the roads were bad, these things broke down frequently. So because you had to travel on rough surfaces. So this means of this way of transportation was very slow, very expensive, and couldn't really carry a lot of load. Okay? Now, like I said, in the Industrial Revolution, you would have more materials, more products. So they need to be transported. They needed to be brought from one place to another. So there was a need for better roads, and some people, stepped up and contributed to the improvement of roads. So, for instance, you had private companies. They were called turnpike trusts. They had the permission of the government, of parliament. It was their job to maintain roads. Well, some sections of road, so not all the roads. And then if you used those particular roads, then you had to pay a toll. Okay, so you had to pay a certain amount. So that contributed to the maintenance of particular roads. So by almost mid 18th century, turnpike trusts, these private companies, were responsible for about 35,000 kilometers of road, and yet this didn't cover nearly enough of the road system. So I suppose Britain was fortunate that a couple of people started to they were able to invent a way of building roads. So, for instance, you have the Telford system, named after Thomas Telford. So he was able to improve road construction. The idea was to dig deep foundations, and then at first you put uh, there's a layer of heavy stones, and then on top of that you would put smaller stones, and then at the very top you would fill that with gravel. So these this sorry this kind of road was cambered. That means that it's sloping. You have a high point in the middle, and then it slopes downwards to the sides, to either side. So I'll give you an example here. This is what it means: a cambered surface, meaning it's not totally level. It slopes to the side here, so that when it rains, water goes to the sides. Okay, so like I said, the Telford system, you had uh, big stones here, smaller stones on the top, and then gravel. This is gravel. Okay, and then you have, on the other hand, another system made by John McAdam, the McAdam system. So he didn't McAdam didn't see the need for a deep foundation. So he basically just needed a broken stone and then gravel on top of that. And it's also cambered, and you would have ditches on either side for the water. Okay, so this was a you know John McAdam's system was a little bit better because it was cheaper. It was basically the same, very similar system. And this improved travel quite a bit. So, for instance, because of road improvements, journey time was cut to, just to give you an example, if you had to go from London to Manchester, which is about 300, that would have meant you had to cover a distance of 335 kilometers. In the late 18th century, that would have taken you 4 days. By 1830, you're talking about only 18 hours. So more people started to travel in stagecoaches. That's a stagecoach. Okay. And because of that, a greater amounts of raw materials products were being transported, more efficiently. So transport became faster and cheaper as well. So on this map, you get an idea of how far the distance between London and Manchester. So this is a stagecoach. So that meant that it traveled from one fixed point to another. As you can see here, uh, as it they were used as early as 1640, and much later in Paris. But then they would become really important. They would become more common, in the 19th century, just because of the new roads that were constructed. So it was easier to use these things, more convenient, and offered faster travel. I mean, relatively fast compared to how it was before. Okay, so I'll stop there and continue in the next recording. I hope this is clear. See you there.